All right, I think we're ready to get started. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I'm really grateful that you're here for this great conversation that we're about to have on creating equitable opportunity for all students in the virtual classroom. My name is Kim Opelt, and I'm the Director of Advocacy and Community here at CLAS, and I will be your host and your moderator today. Before we dive into our discussion with our amazing panelists, I'm just going to take a little bit of time to introduce them. I will give you a little bit of a background on CLAS, and I want to give some insight into the landscape of distance learning and all of the challenges and maybe even some opportunities that we're seeing that this whole process has been bringing to students and educators alike. So let's get started. Quick note before we do. If you have any questions for our panelists throughout the conversation, feel free to put that into the Q&A, and I will draw from that as we go through our conversation. So our panelists today are just kind of a rock star group. We have Michael Walker, who is the Director of the Office of Black Student Achievement at Minneapolis Public Schools. We also have Martin McGuire, who is the Director of EdTech Digital Solutions and User Experience, a big job at Chicago Public Schools. And then also we have Leanne Slama, who is the Chief of Staff at Colorado Springs School District 11. So thank you everyone for being here. So today we'll be talking a lot about the transition to virtual learning and really about how virtual learning is not necessarily the best replacement for the classroom, and just really how everything is that we've done in the classroom has had a challenge as we've transitioned online. So part of the struggle I think that we've seen throughout all of this is that the students' classroom experience has been greatly diminished when we've moved teaching and learning online. Certain tasks became really a lot more difficult, if almost non-existent, when we moved to a virtual environment. So those tasks like taking attendance or even facilitating quizzes or tests, group discussions, group work, and presentations by students have all been really, really hard to do in this virtual setting. And that's where we brought in CLAS. So over the course of the pandemic, we have taken a deep look of where the virtual classroom can become more interactive, more engaging, and then more responsive to the needs of the students. So CLAS really brings together all of those best features of the classroom and then puts it right on top of Zoom, which is a technology that students and teachers are used to using. And we're just really excited about bringing together these really two technologies to facilitate an actual virtual classroom experience that mimics the in-person experience. So over the course of development and bringing kind of this product to life, we've thought long and hard about what the future holds for the virtual classroom, and then how that ties into creating access and equity in the school building and even beyond. And that's where I really want to focus today. So as many of you have probably experienced, distance learning has hit our low income and our Black and Hispanic students particularly hard during this time. We've seen a lot of struggles when it comes to learning loss, when it comes to dropout rates, and even when it comes to school budgeting. And I'm not sure if you've seen, but there was a study by McKinsey released last year that found, late last year, that found that some underserved students were most likely to receive lower quality instruction when it comes to a remote setting, if they received instruction at all. And so you can see here that the Black and Hispanic and lower income students were greater proportionately seeing no instruction or that low quality or remote instruction. And that experience has really taken a toll, as you can see here too. Students from lower income backgrounds were less likely to log into their courses. They were more likely to go through their day unsupervised. They didn't have an adult near, or had an adult that was doing other work at the home, and they were less engaged. So So I think only about 60 or 70% of students were really logging in regularly to their courses. So we definitely saw a big drop off in terms of engagement. But everything isn't all doom and gloom when we look at the past year. As we come out of the school year and out of this pandemic, on the other side, we really have a lot of lessons to learn from, both through the research that we've done and through our own personal experiences. So with the combination of that high quality technology and some purposeful instruction, we can really take the best practices of virtual learning into a classroom in all types of settings. So on that note, I'm really looking forward to bringing in our panel. And I'm going to stop sharing here so we can bring everyone up on video. And we have Martin and Leanne and Michael. Thank you again all for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So I want to talk first about just your experience and what you have been going through, what your district makeup is, and kind of what setting you're currently in right now for distance or hybrid or virtual learning. So let's start with Michael on this one.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Michael Walker, Minneapolis Public Schools. And right now our district is about 32,000 students. And, just like with everyone else, it's a struggle to get started with virtual learning and distance learning. We were not a one-to-one device to students. And so we had to really get our stuff in gear to get those products out to our students so that we can get them prepared to be able to actually engage in a virtual online learning space, and which also brought other obstacles and hurdles. Right now, we have to worry about the Wi-Fi and the internet and those sorts of things, and having multiple students in a home trying to utilize that Wi-Fi and how that slows things down. So those are some of the huge hurdles that we were dealing with early on with the space. Right now, currently, we are having some of our students who are back face-to-face, and that is really our youngest learners right now. So our K2, they started back, I want to say, the first week in February, and then actually the start of this week, we brought back our 3rd through 5th grade students. And so, so far, so good. I think right now, obviously everybody's trying to get acclimated to being back into face-to-face with all the additional protocols that needs to be put in place to keep our little ones safe and also our adults safe in those spaces. So just trying to figure out that time and how to navigate those processes. So we're still in the early stages. And I know our governor just released something last week about getting our secondary back as soon as possible as well. So I know that is the next move that we're going to be making.
Great. Good. Well, thank you. Leanne, can you tell us a little bit about your district?
Hi, I'm Leanne Slama, Chief of Staff from Colorado Springs District 11. So we have 55 schools in our district. We have about 24,500 students, a little lower this year than anticipated. 60% of our students qualify for free and reduced lunch, and we have about 3,800 employees. So in regards to our model, I think we probably have done every model possible this year, but we've tried it all. But we are currently, our K5 is currently 4 days a week in person. The Mondays are reserved for professional development for staff, as well as collaboration and PLC work. Our high schools are a hybrid model. So again, Mondays are reserved for staff and professional development days, PLCs, collaboration. And then Tuesday through Friday is hybrid model and cohort of students. So every other day, there's a different cohort that's in. So our students in high school are attending in-person classes twice a week. Effective March 10th, we are going back to 5 days a week in-person instruction for everyone. Oh, wow. So we are excited to see our students and welcome everyone back. And we know it's going to bring a ton of challenges, but we're looking forward to seeing everyone again. So
great. Well, thank you. Yeah, looking forward to hearing your perspective. And Martin, how are things going over at Chicago?
Well, thank you for having me. First of all, Martin McGuire, I'm the Director of Ed Tech for the Chicago Public Schools. We serve about 300 and over 355,000 students. We have over 600 schools in Chicago. 78% of our students are considered low income. Our census data here tells us that over 110,000 students didn't have internet connectivity. So when this pandemic started, that was a huge hole for us, as well as providing students with devices. So you have homes where students may have a family computer or a shared computer within a household, but when you have 2, 3, 4 students at home plus a mom or dad working at home, it became challenging. So not only did we have lack of internet connectivity in our schools, we had lack of devices. Situations where we have food deserts here in Chicago, we had technology deserts here in Chicago. So there were some huge challenges that we needed to address as remote learning started. Currently, though, as far as our current status, pre-K and cluster schools are back already. Okay. K through 5 will be back on Monday. And then our 6th through 8th will be back the following Monday. And we're still working out a plan for our high school students to return.
All right, everyone's busy and in different situations and different models. So thank you all. I'm looking forward to the mix of perspectives that you'll bring. So the first question, and you've kind of covered this a little bit in some ways, but I wanted to hear even more about your transition to distance or hybrid learning, thinking back into maybe last year or the school year. And then what obstacles did you face? What were you most prepared for? What were you least prepared for in this situation? And let's start with Leanne on this one.
Well, it's been almost a year when we were sitting in this kind of what we call the war room that day, trying to identify what our plan was going to be for the next 2 weeks. That's how we had approached it. Like right before spring break, we're like, okay, we have these 2 weeks and then we'll be back. And we all know that did not happen. So I think in education, I've always thought education is really difficult to move the ship. Like it takes so much time. But I think, which is a challenge. But I think one of the things that we've learned is like we can be nimble. In our district, it was going to take us years to do a rollout of one-to-one laptop initiative or tech distribution, and we were able to do it within a few months. Now, just because technology is in a student's hand doesn't mean that they have access to the internet or access to the instruction that they need to meet their specific needs. So I think that has been a challenge for us. I think as we work in our community and with our partners, we're really starting a conversation of the internet has almost become like a utility, just like having water or the internet, water or electricity or whatnot. Like the internet has become such a prominent part of our lives that it's really difficult when we talk about doing remote instruction or for students as well as for adults, right? Like we all learn 24 hours a day, we're all learning because we have access to the internet. And so for some of our families, that is not accurate. I think that has been one of the biggest challenges for us. So utilizing devices like hotspots are, great. And then you have limited data. How do you get, unlimited, paying for all those plans? I think one of the areas of which that we were able to be the most nimble in is actually our food and nutrition services. So being able to have drive up kiss and go lanes, I think that's how they refer to them as, but kiss and go lanes of students coming to pick up food during the day, and we actually worked with our neighboring districts. So even if you didn't live in our District 11, we were sharing information about where you could go and grab the free meals that are available in the district of which you resided in. Same as we were welcoming students who were not D11 students, but maybe went to a neighboring district. So that was one area that I think that we were really focused on, is ensuring that we knew that students, we were providing the only meal that some of our students were having during their school day. And we wanted to ensure, how do we continue to make that a priority for our students and for our families? So we've learned a lot, and I think we're still trying to be nimble, and we're still trying to adjust as every day we get new data and new pieces of information. But I'm really proud that we're able to make some big changes that I hope will be lifelong changes from what we've learned this year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Martin, what did you see or experience during that transition?
It very similar to what Leanne just spoke of. I think that one of the biggest things, having been a lifelong Chicagoan and a resident of the South Side, I knew that the food deserts that we deal with here in Chicago were going to be problematic. Again, students rely on our schools in many cases for meals. So I think that was one of the things that we were able to move very quickly. Our leadership quickly pivoted and said, let's create these grab and go programs at 450 of our schools. I think within the first 6 months of the pandemic, there were over 21 million meals that were delivered via that method. And then when we started looking at the technology, we really called upon the philanthropic community donors. We put together a program that already existed, was called Chicago Connect. And it was mission was to set forth and handle some of the technology deserts that we're dealing with within the city. And we have over 110,000 students that did not have internet connectivity. On our South Side, one of our communities, our Inglewood community, like almost half of all students did not have internet connectivity. On our West Side, 1 in 3 students did not have internet connectivity. So this organization was able to quickly respond and provide internet connectivity to homes, hotspots to our homes. And I think so far we've delivered internet connectivity now to 50,000 students. Wow. As part of that initiative. So there's really been what we were able to do well, I guess, was really come together. Our city leadership, our mayor, our CEO, our chief ed officer, our CIO, was really to get together and really tackle a lot of these issues collaboratively. And it's been difficult, but it's definitely moving in the right direction at this point.
Wow. Yeah, that is quite the scale. And Michael, what were your experiences in Minneapolis?
Yeah, it sounds like everybody's in the same situation. I think food was the real quick thing that we were able to really get into motion at a earlier and easier pace, reaching those families who needed those meals at that time when school was out. And so we did a really good job of, similar to what I hear in Chicago, is we set up some sites for families to be able to come grab and go with lunches and breakfasts. And we started to package them up in weekly portion sizes so they didn't have to come back every single day. So we put a process in place for that. And really, I want to give a huge shout out to our support staff. They were very instrumental in delivering a lot of the technology to our students and families in need. So they were very upfront and on the ground level with that. And sometimes I don't necessarily know if they get their just due with all the work that they do and things that they're able to provide in times of crisis or in times of need. And without any reservations, they showed up. They stayed at drop-off sites to drop off technology and food, but they also went out and hand delivered those things, which gives you the sense that, we all want each other to be safe. We all want each other to have the things that we need necessarily in order to thrive and be excellent. And so that's a real huge plus and made us feel like a community in our city. Some of the obstacles that took place, obviously, people are mentioning it, Leanne, and so did Martin mention it a while, is the technology and the internet. And so those were huge hurdles that we had to overcome right away, trying to figure out how to get those technology pieces out to the families, but then also ensuring that they had the opportunity to be able to use those services. One of the things that I don't necessarily know if we were prepared for or if we actually thought about it when we sent our students home for distance learning. We have to remember the pandemic hit different communities differently, and you talked about that in the outset of this panel. And we talked about this term that came to be like very catchy: essential workers, essential employees, essential this, essential that. And really, what that meant to me is that it's really our frontline workers and our members of our community who were really from the Black and Brown community who were doing those tasks and those jobs, right? And so we had to be mindful that those people were outside the home during this time of this first transition. And so the littles, our young kids, our young students didn't necessarily have the adult supervision there to help them navigate the technology once they got the technology in their hands. And so now we were reliant on some of our older students to help their younger siblings go through that process, which then in turn created an issue with them in their classes and their coursework. And so it became a huge impact. And I don't know if we were necessarily ready and thought through that 100%, but I think we're doing better at it now. But we still have that gap where we have families who have parents at home and some who do not, who are those quote unquote, like I said, these essential workers that we dubbed.
I would like to add just something, since Michael threw a shout out. If I got a group, these support people at the schools, the lunchroom workers, our principals that reported to work every day were huge in delivering these meals, at the schools, at the 450 locations, and getting these meals to students, even if they had to take them to the home. So I don't want to forget our principals. They were very important in getting that done.
Absolutely. Shout out to all those unsung heroes. I think the educators were often overlooked throughout this whole process. So I appreciate that. So kind of piggybacking on what Michael said about, not being aware of some of those issues, such as, who is going to be home with students and like all of you talked about the food deserts. What lessons have you learned when working to set up an equitable virtual opportunity for students? And kind of, if you have any examples, I would love to hear those, but what did you run into? Maybe were some of those obstacles, and what have you learned when setting that up? And Martin, let's start with you.
I would say that, one of the things that we did in the very beginning that we were able to move quickly on was, while students didn't have internet, they didn't have devices when this first started. One thing that we did have was content that we're developing, a universal curriculum that's being developed right now in Chicago that we're going to be unveiling in its entirety this summer. But we had content, and we had partners that were coming to us saying we can help. Some of those partners were broadcast television. So we had WLS, we had WCIU, we had Univision, 3 channels that came to us and said, we will offer you on-air time to deliver some of these lessons. So we repackaged a lot of what we had and made it available for broadcast. I think we did, before the summer, we did 6 hours of programming a day on the 3 different channels, one channel being 100% in Spanish. And I think that was one of the things that we were able to quickly do. And those partnerships with those organizations were very important for us in the very beginning as we started to work through some of the hurdles that were associated with devices and internet connectivity and what have you.
Absolutely. That's true. So Michael, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I would say one thing that we learned, or at least that I learned throughout this process, is listen. Slow down and listen. Listen to our students, listen to our families. If we ask the right questions, they'll give us the information, and then it's our duty to go out and find out how to deliver that information to them. And so one thing that was really at the forefront of this is that we had to realize that everybody is going through a doggone pandemic. Right. And so while we're trying to be so focused on this academic piece and keeping the country moving, well, people were getting anxiety, people were having stressors, folks were getting sick. And so one thing that we focused on specifically in my department is we started to do wellness checks. And so we did wellness checks, meaning just calling students, calling families, and having conversations about how are you doing? How are things going on in your world? How are you finding ways to stay active? How are you finding ways to find some space? Because remember, we were confined into our homes. And so sometimes we need to have space to be able to just be by ourselves. And it can be difficult, right? In a house with 5, 6, 7 people. So just being real intentional about doing that, so that if we can get them to understand the moment that they're in, to calm down a little bit, the academics will come. But I think sometimes we were focused so hard on the academics, we forgot about people. And now we're pushing them to do this work and to do this and to do that. And they're like, I can't even focus on that. And as a counselor, so I'm a counselor, we know that if your mind is consumed with anxiety, stress, and all those things, the likelihood of you learning goes way down, way low. And so I say that our department and what it permeated throughout the district is that we have to start to do some of these just wellness checks and not even talk about school at certain points, but just to check in on the well-being and health of our families, listen to what they're saying their needs are. It's not to say that we can meet and help every need, but we may be able to find some resource that we can select and help them get to so that we get some of those needs met. So really being a listener and providing that space for them to share.
Absolutely. I think that's a good lesson for us all. Leanne, what did you learn in that transition?
I think as we all sit probably in our homes right now on this webinar, I think that we've realized that at home is very different for a lot of students, and many of them don't have necessarily a safe living environment where they would want it to be shared on camera with their peers. So I think that was an aspect of how do we ensure that we are providing a safe and comforting experience for our students online. In that same breath, I think it was something we hadn't really thought about, but had been brought to our attention as our students who are transitioning in gender and have maybe a name that is their previous gender in our school system, because that is like a biologically legal, their still name, but yet they are transitioning and therefore they appear on screen as they're who they are, and maybe their name doesn't match with it. So how do you respect students in their journey of where they are to ensure that they are then in this welcoming environment? So I think that's a part of equity of which that we're talking about as well is, we have this racial divide that occurs, but we also have a gender divide as students are going through that transition. And for us, it was kind of like, what in our system is preventing this from happening? What is our practice usually in classrooms? Because it's very easy in a classroom for a student to tell a teacher, please don't call me by this name, call me by this. But yet sometimes our technology is not aligned in that same sense when we have similar limitations. So for us, it was kind of working through what those limitations were to ensure that we were honoring the student and who they were. So just, probably a small percentage of our students, but in other larger districts, I could see that being an impact as well.
Absolutely. Right. Sometimes those things that you don't even think about can have a big impact on students. So thank you for that. So I want to shift the conversation just a little bit to classroom technologies and really looking toward the future. So it's kind of an exciting question, I think, is what does the future of technology in the classroom hold? I know it's a loaded question, but I would love to hear your perspectives of, now that we have students ready to use technology, we have teachers who are hands-on and understand how everything works. What is the future of technology in our classroom hold? And Michael, let's start with you on that one.
Yeah, I think that is a huge question, and I don't even know how to necessarily answer that, because I think it just opens up a whole lot of opportunities for our students, but also the educators, right? How can we utilize the outside world and bring it into our classroom? That's one thing that is possible, where now we don't have to necessarily be face-to-face to experience certain things. We can do some of these virtual type processes. I also think that when we talk about what does the future hold, it's still yet to be known, right? Because even though we have been learning over this course of this year, there's still so much technology. There's still so many options that we haven't tapped into, or that someone may have done a small little tap into it and haven't been able to expand it widely. And so I still think there's going to be some more innovative things that will come from it. One thing that I start to think about is, as we talk about, and Kim, you talked about earlier, the learning loss that occurred. And I try to stay away from that type of terminology. And the reason being is that our kids have learned something totally different, some skill sets that we may not even know how valuable those will be in the future. Right. And so they may have, quote unquote, lost some learning that we deemed was important, but we got to realize that we're not in a normal situation. We're not in a typical world. And so we had the same expectations of our students, right, in virtual space that we did in face-to-face.
Right.
That just doesn't even make sense from a logical standpoint, right? So how do we be open to these new opportunities? And so when I think about the future, I said some of our youngest learners right now, some of our kids right now will create some innovative technologies that we will be able to use in education that will benefit people for years to come. So I'm waiting to see what these bright, brilliant minds will come up with, because we know that innovation comes out of things when there's lack of. So they have seen the lack of things that we've been able to provide during this virtual world, and they will be innovative and creative to create a better virtual space in the future. So that's kind of how I'm looking at this possibility of future.
That sounds great. I like that. I like that perspective. And Leanne, what do you think the future of technology in the classroom holds?
Well, I think for starters, the terminology in the classroom changes, right? Because I don't think the classroom is no longer going to be necessarily in a school. It's not between four walls. And I think that is one of the huge advantages of technology, is like you can learn any hour of the day at any location wherever you are. And I think that is extremely powerful. I think a long time ago, I had heard this terminology, and I don't even know if it's still accurate, so don't quote me on this by any means, but the idea of like being digital natives and digital immigrants. Mm-hmm. So we are, my age, I'll give it away here, but I am a digital immigrant in the sense of like, I did not get my first computer until my family computer, like when I was in third grade, maybe, and it was DOS. I mean, what are you going to do with it? But way back in the day, like I said, with my dot matrix printer. But I also, had that privilege of having access to that technology. But our students who are educating now were literally born with phones right next to them, or with iPads and tablets. And I think that is what's going to cause us to shift our entire thinking in regards to technology, because not only are they the students that we're educating now, but they are going to be the students educating the next generation. And they are already going to have lived and breathed with technology their entire life. Right. As those of us who didn't have that opportunity are still learning and growing. And some days I feel like I say that I've become my mother in relation to technology, that it's all like passing me by so quickly. But I think I think that's the exciting part of it in the future, is that those that have been raised with technology are going to be able to take us even further than what we could ever imagine, even at this time.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I was the same. Third grade, I remember the computer at home.
Yes, exactly.
And Martin, I'm interested to hear your perspective from as an IT leader in one of the country's largest districts. What do you feel that the future of technology in the classroom holds?
Well, I think that the walls definitely disappear, right? We need asynchronous and synchronous models. We need, personally, I think that we need to standardize in Chicago on what classrooms look like, what facilitation devices are available, peripheral devices are available to teachers that can allow them to deliver lessons in the classroom, but then still be able to give them the ability to do a hybrid approach where they may be teaching students in the classroom, students online. So those are the big changes for us in Chicago as we unveil this universal curriculum. Is what is the final 20 yards? And to me, the final 20 yards, that red zone is the classroom and is the peripheral devices and how this is going to be facilitated. So we have to consider things like teacher training. I'm a big proponent of virtual events. So we this school year will be doing over 700 different virtual events through one of our vendor partners, Streamable Learning. And we do events with museums, with zoos, with aquariums, with authors. We've done everything from underwater shark exploration to cultural events like Day of the Dead activities in November, Martin Luther King celebration in January, and there's just a ton of opportunity. Content is king, and there is just a ton of content out there, and there are a ton of subject matter experts out there that really want to contribute, and getting these partnerships together and making those type of opportunities available to our classrooms and to our students, regardless of if they're in the classroom or at home. And we've been able to do that, and we're still working. It's still a work in progress, but that's what I'm most excited about in Chicago.
Awesome. That sounds great. And I think, throughout all these conversations, and especially as we move to looking at the future, I just want to ask too, like, how will this change access and equity into the future? So how is technology and the future of classroom technology, and how is that going to impact access and equity in your district? And let's start with Leanne on this one.
Well, for starters, I think if we don't change based on this experience that we've had in this global pandemic, like, shame on us. Like, if this pandemic has provided us with anything, it is an opportunity for education to operate completely different than what it has previously. And I think even as we start budgeting for next year and kind of going through those processes within our district, it's still a struggle because we still revert back to like where our areas of comfort were. And if this year should have taught us anything, like, we need to be okay with being uncomfortable and making, decisions at a more timely fashion that are a little bit more directly related to what our students need. So I think that is going to be the epicenter of what happens in the future, is like that education just needs to be able to change. I think for us as in our district, when we think about the future, I think this opportunity has provided us a way to re-engage with our community in ways that we didn't do before. We had the technology, but for whatever reason, it was stuck in our heads that parents had to come to school in order to participate in the PTA. I don't know why, but that was always how it was, right? Like, I need to see you in person to make sure that you really exist. But I think now everything has been virtual in the past year. And I'm not quite sure I can state that our engagement has increased, but I think our outreach has at least increased, and that we are really working on making those connections with our families in order for them to be engaged, because we need families to be engaged so our students remain engaged. And that was, a hard lesson that we learned this past year, was like really difficult to get students engaged in everyday classroom. It's not about attendance. It's not about them showing up, but how do you get them engaged in the learning? And I think that will be a key aspect of what technology will provide in the future. But I think, for us, it's still just like this constant battle of this mind shift of what we've done for the past, how many of 150 years in education, and now we're just like, okay, we got to rethink some things. And technology has provided us with that opportunity. And it's not even like technology has provided it, now that I'm thinking about it, because technology has been there. It's just being able to, like, what are we leaning on as our resources to still achieve or meet the goal that we were looking for and exceed beyond that goal. So I think, it forced us to think differently. And that's why I say, like, it's a shame if we don't make changes. This has been the opportunity for it. So,
yep, absolutely. Martin, what are your thoughts on how this will change access and equity in your district?
Well, I would say, first of all, I hope that we never go back. I know Leanne had mentioned, how quickly we were able to modify our plans, right, to go from a 3-year program where you're going to get computers to everybody to a couple of months. It's really all about our priorities. And I think if we can now shift some of those priorities, understanding that the world has changed, we may never go back to the way things were. And dare I say, a 1-to-1 may not even be sufficient. Maybe a 2-to-1 where a computer's at home and a computer's in the school, potentially. Eliminating these technology deserts and giving people internet connectivity as a basic human right. And then, of course, these food deserts need to be addressed in Chicago. We need to stay on top of that, because you cannot learn if you're hungry. And too many of our students are going hungry every day, and that has to end in Chicago. So I hope that we don't go back to the way things were. I hope we realign our priorities and realize that we have to provide these services to our families, and we have to make resources available inside school and at the home. And until we do that, I don't think that we've really completed our mission, or really have.
Yep. Absolutely. And Michael, Other thoughts?
Yeah, I echo everything that Martin and Leanne said, and then I would just add when I think about equity right away, how can it change for our district, and this can be for other districts. We know that there's a disproportionality of suspensions or out of school time for our Black and Brown students, and we talk about the data of that being learning loss, right? Because they're not in our seats, they're not in the building to learn. Hopefully we can find ways where students don't have to miss that learning, even though they may have been removed from school. So how do we utilize the technology that we have to make sure that they still get that learning connected to their teachers and get that instruction on a day-to-day basis? If we can do that, we may be able to close this perceived achievement gap that we speak so much about in our schools, because we know one of those factors is about attendance and being in school for the most part. So that could eliminate some of that. And so that is one equity move that I see that could happen and have an impact specifically for our Black and Brown students who are disproportionately referred or suspended out of class and out of school.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And kind of on that note too, what do you envision for next year's classroom? So how is technology and, things like class and other technologies, how will that expand the world for students? And what do we have to look forward to in the classrooms of the future? And let's start with Michael on this one.
Me think here. What do I envision for the future? Well, I think we've kind of been talking about it or talking around it. Each person has made different statements of a future of next year. I think it should be kind of, as they said, no walls, right? So how do we bring everything into this community? How do we allow for the community to be part of the learning process, to engage in the learning process? We use this term rigor. We throw it around so much. We need to be rigorous. We need to be rigorous. Well, we first need to make sure that the information is relevant, right? Because rigor without relevance means nothing. So we have to make sure that this information that we want to provide to our students is relevant at the same time that it's rigorous. And so what we have to do that is bringing in that community feel, bringing back the space where schools used to be a center, a hub for the community. And I know our communities have expanded because we can live in different spaces, but that still is a community nonetheless. And so how do we provide opportunities and space for those communities to come together and share knowledge and transfer knowledge? Well, we can use our classrooms, we can use the technology in our spaces. And so I envision a space or schools or places where learning is always happening. It's always innovative. There's new and different ways to do it using technology, bringing in different speakers, visiting certain places. I mean, like I said, we've done it on small scales, but I think now with the way that our teachers have learned to utilize different things, I mean, we've had teachers who have created videos that are sending out to students in their classrooms so that they can engage in the learning at different times. And so we want to make sure that continues to happen. We have students who have utilized their skill sets of being on these social media sites, Twitter, what's that one, TikTok, and making videos, that they have utilized that into the classroom to further learning and to share learning across spaces. And so if we can continue to do that and use the tools that we have that students are already accustomed to, we can make learning much more engaging. And it even makes me think about what Leanne was saying, engagement. We may have to redefine what engagement is and what it looks like. Right. And so that's something that we should start asking questions to our young people to hear, how do they feel and what do they see as engagement? And now we can turn our attention to that and not try to create something that doesn't need to be created unless we hear it from our students and community.
Absolutely. So many opportunities. I love that. Leanne, what are your thoughts on the classroom for next year?
Yeah, we were just talking about this with some of our principals, and one of our principals automatically said, like, no more paper. Like, I am cutting our printing budget for next year, which made me giggle because I think part of it is like we had all these resources. We've had, online curriculum, we've had all these sort of things, but there's something innate in some of our educators that just feel the need to make a classroom set of copies or whatever it is, or, you know, and I'm still that person. I need to read a book, right? I'm not there yet, but I'm working on it. But I see that as being one of the aspects of for next year is just like, how are we leveraging the technology? And Martin, you brought up a great point about a 2-for-1, you know, need for technology. And I'm like, man, it took us this pandemic to get to 1-to-1. You know, I can't even imagine a 2-to-1 scenario where we're having, you know, the technology available at the school so kids don't have to travel with their laptops or their tablets back and forth, but that does make the most sense to it. So I'm really hopeful that our teachers, because ultimately that's where this shift is going to occur, is that our teachers really focus on instruction in a different way, and that they are focused on professional development that really brings pedagogy of education to the next level. What, you know, from moving to butts and seats in rows in a, you know, in a very, you know, traditional classroom setup to something that looks completely different. Yeah. And I think technology is going to be the kind of encompassing of that change to happen in the future. So I'm really hopeful that next year things are going to look really different in our classrooms. But I'm also realistic in knowing sometimes change is hard for people and it's going to take some time. And as a district administrator, it's our job to really meet the need of where our staff are at. They're on a very wide spectrum of like really comfortable with technology, and others are, where is my overhead projector at and how do I utilize that when teaching online? You know, like that's the range. And I think that is one of those things that we have to really work on, is how do you meet our teachers where they are in order to keep bringing them along on this technology journey, because our students are just going to keep moving past us, and that opportunity gets lost.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Martin, I know that you have quite a vision too for the classrooms of next year. What are your thoughts?
Well, I would say, and I'm sure students don't want to hear this, but I would say, let's say goodbye to the snow day, right? And let's take this as maybe an opportunity to better prepare our teachers, because I think we have some phenomenal teachers in Chicago. And I think what we need to do a better job is supporting them in the professional development and the training that they need to be successful in this new world. So if we can really focus on training for next year, you know, I would love to be able to see us, you know, have a few days at least a year where we're going to be completely online. That would probably be a good idea, so that we can keep everybody acclimated to the technologies, to the delivery, keep on, you know, investing in their professional development so that they can be more successful in this environment. I think those are some of the things that we need to do. And if we do those things and we're successful, I think that if ever we're kind of thrown back into one of these scenarios, we'll be ready. But it really should have been the direction we were going into all along. I think that it's amazing how fast you can move when you need, you know, the necessity, right? We had to move really quickly, and we were able to pull off some fantastic miracles thanks to our IT team here in Chicago and our city leaders. So it can be done, and I think we just need to focus on who needs to help here. And I think for us in Chicago, it's going to be training our teachers.
Sounds great.
Martin, we have a snow day today. No, wait, we have a snow day today in Colorado Springs, Martin. And let me tell you, all the emails we've been receiving about it being an e-learning day instead. It's definitely a challenge, but
I was just about to jump on that same thing.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I was thinking about it as a kid. I love those snow days. And so they're going to go away. Oh my goodness. I had so many fond memories of just hanging out with my friends and shoveling snow and throwing snow. I don't know if I want that to go away though. I don't know. I'm torn with that one, but I definitely understand.
You know my email address, Michael Walker, if you want to complain about it.
Right. Hot ticket, hot button item is the snow day. but you know, I know a lot of districts as well have, you know, experienced quite a few snow days. So getting overwhelmed and having to add on days to the end of the year is also not a fun thing to do. So I understand. And as a parent, I would appreciate no more snow days too. I want to end on just a really great question that we had from a member of our audience. And I'm going to read the whole thing because I think it's very eloquent, but She says, kudos to these education leaders who are forward thinkers and know that the future of education is not going back to what we did pre-pandemic, but transforming education beyond the limitations of a school building. So the question is, how will you help your communities understand the need for virtual learning beyond the pandemic? And Leanne, let's start on your snow day down there. And how are you going to help your community learn?
It's a really interesting question because it really is shifting the mindset of what is like acceptable. Because even in the business world, the acceptance of working remotely hasn't always been accepted, right? Like there's always this idea of the people are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, or they take it, as more like a vacation than actually working or whatever. And I think that that's true when it comes to education. We have years of thinking that education happens in a school building. And I think that that is really what's going to be challenging, is shifting that mindset. But I think the more that we, for lack of a better word, like push our students into the community and learning experiences, whether that be through technology of bringing people into our school, or our students eventually, hopefully being able to go to the museums and whatnot again, being able to expand the concept of where education and learning can happen is going to be really key to it. But I think, we're going to be potentially going for a facility bond in the fall. So I feel like almost those messages are kind of contradicting in a way. Like we need these new schools, we need these new buildings, but yet we really want to ensure that our students have learning opportunities throughout the community and not necessarily in the building. So what does that even mean in the future? What does it mean for administrative offices in the future? Maybe we don't need, the real estate that we currently have, because we're going to be utilizing technology in such a different way. So I do think it's going to be a challenging transition of that mindset, but I don't think we have a choice but to take it on. And we don't have a choice but to educate people in what that means. And some of them will experience it because their children will be experiencing it at home or wherever it happens. But we just have to start kind of chiseling away at it, like piece by piece.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And Martin, how do you think that, what do you see as your role in helping the community learn, and how will you help that?
Well, I think I mentioned it. We do a lot of virtual programs here in Chicago already. And what I hate to see virtual programs replace the typical face-to-face experiences that students have, whether it be, visiting a museum or a zoo, or having a subject matter expert come to the classroom. I think of those things as things that are right outside our door in our community that students should know about and be able to visit. But I think that there's an entire, let's take it one more step, other cities, other states, other countries, in fact, and what do they have in their communities that can be shared? And I think that's really what we're trying to accomplish here in Chicago. Now that we've gone through this pandemic, now, most of the events that we do are outside of Chicago. We don't typically work with institutions in Chicago because students have access to that already. So we want to give them access to things that they would otherwise not have access to. So I think that's kind of one of the things that's shifting, is that now that students are unable to go to a lot of the institutions in and around Chicago, and we have some fantastic museums and zoos around Chicago. Now we're starting to work with those organizations to include them in some of the virtual events that we're providing to our kids. While that's going to become very popular, I would imagine, I'd hate to see it be the replacement for a lot of the face-to-face activities that students are used to.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. We could bring Chicago to Minneapolis maybe sometime.
Absolutely.
Speaking of Minneapolis, Michael, any thoughts on how you can help your communities understand that need for virtual learning beyond the pandemic?
Yeah, I think I want to change the word a little bit, not necessarily help, but maybe show the value of virtual learning and virtual opportunities. Because I think they know they know that it's coming, but how do we show them that what's valuable, how it shows up, what is important, And that way it's more of a conversation together, right? It's more of building this together because they have some insight, they have some strategies, they have some techniques. And so I think too often we're trying to impose things on them versus really truly being collaborative and being a community and going at this together in a way that benefits both parties, if that makes sense. And so I'm more looking at the process of not how do I tell them, I want to show them, and showing them, that means we have to provide really good programming. If you guys have been aware, I'm sure most of you who have kids or are teaching classes or have popped into different classrooms, now the learning has been more than just with the students, it's with the family. Right. So I'll just say in some of the classes that I've been in, families are engaging in some of the learning that's happening in our classes. Right. And now that takes on a whole nother layer of building family connections, building family knowledge, right? And now you just start to recreate this space that, oh, we are all doing this together, we're all learning together. And now families are saying, oh, I understand why virtual learning or why these virtual platforms are important. Because look, I get to learn with you, or we get to share this opportunity together. You know, for instance, like for our department, the Office of Black Student Achievement, a couple weeks ago, we did a week-long events of different themes for Black History Month, right? So one day we had virtual reading to younger students. And so we had a webinar set up and kids across the district in their classrooms chimed in, but we also had outside families who chimed in on their own time to listen to the stories that we were reading. We did a viewing of the movie that just came out, Judas and the Black Messiah, as a family night. And then we did a panel discussion afterwards. So now we're able to do this learning together in community. And so it's not that they have to come into our spaces to get it. They can be right in the comfort of their own home and still get this learning together. So I think that's how I want to show value in this virtual learning to the community. So then they want to keep having it happen.
Absolutely. That's the perfect note to end on. And this time flew by so fast. So thank you to everyone who submitted questions, and we'll catch you on another webinar or we'll respond via email. But thank you so much to our panelists for this great discussion. I think it was very eye-opening, and we have a lot to think about as we move forward in the future of technology, the future of the virtual classroom, and just for those of you out there, we have some great new resources on our website, class.com. So please feel free to stop by and let us know if you have any questions. But thank you all.